Rain drizzled from a gray, unfeeling sky, soaking the empty park in a chill that seemed to seep into every bone. On a weathered wooden bench sat Michael, a man whose shoulders had learned the weight of the world far too well. His coat, faded and frayed at the cuffs, clung to him like an old friend that had long lost its warmth. Droplets clung to his hair, sliding down into the lines of his weary face, but he didn't move to brush them away. His gaze was locked on the ground, as if somewhere between the cracks of the pavement lay all the answers he had lost. People hurried past, strangers under umbrellas, their shoes splashing through shallow puddles. The rhythm of their footsteps echoed the hurried pace of a world that didn't have time for pauses, or for people like him. No one slowed. No one looked twice. It wasn't just the cold that made him tremble, it was the kind that lived inside, the kind that no scarf or fire could chase away. Each breath he drew felt heavier than the last, clouding in the air before vanishing, much like the quiet hope he once carried. The park around him seemed to hum with indifference, the swaying trees, the distant traffic, the soft patter of rain. Yet here he sat, a silent figure on a lonely bench, a man swallowed by the feeling that he had become invisible. To the rest of the world, Michael was just another passerby, except he wasn't passing by at all. A woman walked briskly along the path, her coat pulled tight against the rain. Beside her, a little girl in a bright yellow raincoat splashed through puddles, her laughter a rare note of warmth in the gray evening. As they drew near the bench, the girl's steps slowed. Her eyes, wide and curious, landed on Michael. She noticed the way his hands trembled, fingers curled inwards as if trying to hold on to something invisible. He lifted his head just enough to meet her gaze and forced the corners of his mouth upward in a faint, almost apologetic smile. But his eyes betrayed him, tired, red-rimmed, and glistening with tears he had tried too hard to hide. The mother, sensing the pause, gently tugged the girl's hand. "Come on, sweetheart," she murmured, her tone protective yet urgent. The girl obeyed at first, taking a few small steps forward, but her gaze never left Michael. Something about him seemed to hold her there, a quiet sadness she didn't fully understand but could somehow feel. As they moved away, the girl looked back over her shoulder. Michael's figure seemed even smaller now, hunched against the rain, his faint smile already gone. The girl's brow furrowed. She didn't have the words for it, but her heart ached in a way that made her stop mid-step. The mother turned, puzzled, but the little girl's eyes stayed locked on the lonely man on the bench, as if some unspoken connection had just been formed. Without warning, the little girl pulled her hand free from her mother's grasp and ran back through the drizzle, her boots splashing in tiny bursts of water. The mother called after her, startled, but the child didn't slow. She reached Michael, her yellow raincoat bright against the muted, rain-soaked world. Michael blinked in surprise, unsure what to say. Before he could find words, the girl stepped closer and, with the simple certainty only a child can have, wrapped her small arms around him. Her cheek pressed against his damp coat, unbothered by the chill. For a moment, Michael sat frozen. He hadn't felt another person's embrace in longer than he could remember, and the warmth of it seemed to peer straight through the icy layers he had built around himself. Slowly, almost hesitantly, he lifted his hands and held her back, afraid that if he squeezed too tightly, she might disappear. The rain kept falling, the world kept moving, but inside that moment, everything felt still. His eyes stung, and before he knew it, tears spilled freely down his cheeks, mingling with the raindrops. This wasn't just a hug, it was a reminder, a whisper without words telling him he was still here, still human, still worth holding on to. The mother finally caught up, breathless and apologetic, but Michael could only shake his head, his voice caught somewhere between gratitude and disbelief. The mother reached out gently, placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder as if to guide her away, but Michael spoke before she could. His voice was soft, trembling, not from the cold this time, but from the rawness of what he was about to say. "Please, let her stay for a moment," he murmured, his eyes fixed on the little girl. He swallowed hard, then looked up at the mother, his expression vulnerable, almost fragile. "You don't know what this means to me." The mother's brow furrowed, sensing the depth in his tone. Michael hesitated, his lips trembling before the truth slipped out. I was going to end my life tonight, he confessed, the words landing heavy in the damp air. I thought no one would ever notice if I was gone. But, he glanced down at the child still holding him, this hug, she didn't see a stranger. She saw a person. The mother's eyes welled with tears, her hand covering her mouth. She knelt beside her daughter, brushing wet strands of hair from the girl's face, and whispered, "Sweetheart, you may have just saved someone's life." Michael's shoulders shook, but it wasn't from sorrow anymore, it was from the strange, unfamiliar warmth blooming in his chest. A single act, so small yet so profound, had cut through months of hopeless darkness. And in that moment, all three of them stood there, bound together by a kindness too deep for words. The mother rose slowly, still holding her daughter's hand, and gave Michael a gentle, tearful smile. "Sometimes," she said softly, "a little kindness is all it takes to change everything." Her words lingered in the air, warm against the cold drizzle. Michael nodded, his throat too tight to speak. He watched as they turned to leave, the little girl glancing back one last time, her smile as bright as the raincoat she wore. For the first time in months, he didn't feel invisible. Someone had seen him, not the shell he had become, but the person still living inside. He sat for a moment longer, letting the weight of the moment settle into his bones. Then, slowly, he stood. His steps were unsteady, but they were steps forward. The rain no longer felt like it was washing him away, it felt like it was cleansing something old and heavy from his heart. As he walked toward the streetlights in the distance, Michael carried with him the memory of that hug, a warmth that no storm could take away. It wasn't just comfort he had found, it was a reason to keep going, proof that even the smallest act of love could pull someone back from the edge. And somewhere behind him, a little girl in a yellow raincoat had no idea that her tiny arms had just saved a life.